Earlier, I saw a post where people in the comments were swapping real paranormal stuff like trading cards. I hovered over the reply box for a long time. My fingers even moved like muscle memory, like I was about to type the same thing I've typed in my head for decades. Then I backed out, closed the tab, opened it again, backed out again. It's stupid how your body still reacts to something that happened when you were 9. I don't even like the word paranormal. It feels like a costume you put on the story, a way to make it entertaining. What happened to me was not entertaining. It didn't feel mystical. It felt ugly and clinical and wrong, like someone took the rules of the world and bent them until they squealed. And yeah, I know how that sounds. I can hear the comments already. Cool story. Kidnapper. Repressed memory. Carbon monoxide. People love explanations because explanations mean it can't happen to them. I was raised in a house that treated anything spiritual like an infection. My dad was a biologist. Field work, labs, grant proposals, the whole thing. He talked about cells and systems the way other dads talked about football. My mom died when I was 2. Cancer. I don't have any soft memories of her, just photographs and this constant absence that hung in the corners of our house like old smoke. Dad didn't do the comforting mom thing. He did the facts and structure thing. He didn't say, "Mommy's in heaven." He said, "Your mother's body couldn't keep working." That was his version of mercy. Clean, simple, no magic, no ghosts, no prayers. When kids at school told stories about haunted houses or Bloody Mary, he'd snort like they were telling him the earth was flat. People see what they want to see, he'd say, not even looking up from whatever book he was reading. And they remember what suits the story later. I grew up believing him, or at least repeating him. It was easier than admitting that some part of me, some little kid part, wanted the world to have more in it than chemistry and decay. The way he framed it, belief was weakness. Belief was how people got manipulated. My dad didn't get manipulated. My dad cut through things. That's why the one thing I can't cut through still gnaws at me. It's why I've carried it around like a stone in my pocket for over 40 years. I've never been able to put it down. If I didn't still have people alive who remember that time, if I didn't have one brutal newspaper clipping that I've moved from apartment to apartment like contraband, I probably would have convinced myself it was a bad dream or a kid's misunderstanding. But it happened. There are police reports. There are older adults who can still look at me and go quiet, like they're hearing something they don't want to hear. So this is me doing the thing I've always avoided, telling it straight as I remember it, and letting it sit there without dressing it up. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm telling you what I saw, what I didn't see, and what I felt so strongly my body still remembers it. I grew up in a town along the Ohio River. Around 14,000 people, give or take. One of those places that feels like it's tucked into the folds of the land. Rolling hills, thick trees, muddy water that always looked like it was carrying secrets downstream. You could stand on the bank in the evening and hear barges grinding past like giant teeth. In the summer, the air smelled like algae and diesel. In the fall, it smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke and the river going cold. Our neighborhood backed up to woods, not a little decorative treeline, actual goods. The kind you could walk into and lose the street sounds within 20 steps. Most backyards on our side of town did. That was normal there. You grew up with a sense that the forest was just waiting, always there, always patient. Like any small town, we had our folklore. Kids made it up and adults pretended they didn't believe it while still locking their doors a little faster at night. There was the river ghost, some translucent woman people claimed you could see standing on foggy mornings near the old dock, staring out like she was waiting for a boat that never came. There was the devil painter house at the end of Maple Street, the one with the porch caving in and broken bottles glittering in the weeds. My cousin swore his older brother went inside once and saw paintings that made him sick for days. Probably just mold and nerves, but try telling that to a 10-year-old at a sleepover. The story that stuck to me, though, was the one behind our backyard. People called it Blackheart. I don't even remember the full version because nobody told it the same way twice. Sometimes it was a witch, sometimes it was a woman who lost her kids and started taking other people's kids. Sometimes it wasn't a woman at all, but something that lived in the woods and used that name like a mask. The only consistent thing was the warning tone. Like the story existed for one purpose, to make you look over your shoulder. My dad hated that story, not because it scared me, because it was irrational, because the adults who whispered it were the same adults who came to him for advice about vaccines or crops or weird rashes, then went back to trading ghost tales in the church parking lot. Blackheart, he'd say with this irritated little laugh. They can't even decide what it is. That's how you know it's bullshit. Stories mutate. Facts don't. I nodded when he said that. I acted like I agreed. I even repeated it to other kids, sometimes like it made me tougher. But my bedroom window faced the backyard, and past the backyard was the tree line. At night, the woods didn't look like woods. It looked like a wall, a solid, uneven strip of black. If the moon was out, you could see the edges of branches like fingers. If there was wind, the whole wall moved in slow waves, and it felt like something breathing. Some nights, before I could make myself stop, I'd pull the curtain back and stare at that tree line and imagine a shape standing just inside it. Not moving, just waiting. And I'd get this hot, prickly feeling on my scalp like someone was staring right back. That's the kind of stuff you carry as a kid. A story becomes a shadow becomes a habit. I'm telling you about Blackheart because when Maura disappeared, people dragged that name out like it was a tool, like it explained things, like it made the unexplainable feel familiar. I don't know what I believe about it. I don't know if it has anything to do with what happened. I just know the woods behind my house took my best friend in a way I still can't make fit any normal shape. It was October of 1984. I was 9. My best friend Maura lived 3 houses down, close enough that her mom could yell her name from the porch and you could hear it like it was your own mother yelling. That's how our street was. Everyone's voices carried into everyone else's life. Kids ran in packs. Parents swapped gossip over fences, and nobody locked their doors until bedtime. Maura and I had been inseparable since kindergarten. Same classroom, same bus stop, same dumb little rituals. She had this quick laugh that sounded like she was about to spit out whatever she was drinking. She climbed trees like it was normal to be 10 feet off the ground. She could run forever. I was the cautious one. I checked for poison ivy. I worried about stepping on snakes. Maura grabbed my hand and dragged me into trouble, and I loved her for it. We were on fall break, the kind of break that makes you feel like time is a resource you can waste. We spent the days outside until our faces got wind-chapped and our hands smelled like pennies from messing with rusty nails and old bikes. The rules were simple. Stay on our street after dark. Don't go down to the river without an adult. Don't go too far into the woods unless you had someone with you. Someone with you was always Maura for me, and I was always her someone. The woods behind our neighborhood weren't deep wilderness, but they were thick and messy. A lot of underbrush, fallen branches, old deer trails, places where people dumped trash because it was out of sight. If you pushed in far enough, you could find weird stuff, broken furniture, empty beer cases, once even an old mattress with mildew blooms like bruises. There was also a clearing back there that felt like a secret. If you walked in behind my backyard, maybe 15 feet, the trees opened into this field like someone had carved out a private room in the forest. Tall wheatgrass, real golden stuff that waved and hissed in the wind. On 3 sides, it was surrounded by trees. On the 4th side, you could see a little slope down toward a shallow ditch that filled with water when it rained. Near the center of the clearing stood a big maple tree. Thick trunk, rough bark that snagged your skin if you slid your hand down it. We called it the big tree, like we were the first people to ever see it. We played there constantly. It was our place. Not because it was hidden from everyone. If someone wanted to find it, they could, but because it felt like it belonged to us. Kids are territorial like that. You find a patch of the world that feels safe and you claim it. One of our favorite games was stupid simple. Hide and seek, but on one tree. One of us would stand on one side of the trunk, the other would stand on the other side. and you count to 5 and then try to tag the other person's back by circling around. It was all quick steps and laughter and sudden lunges. We always did it the same way. We'd argue about who counted first. We'd accuse each other of peeking. We'd take it too seriously like it mattered. I liked counting with my eyes closed. It wasn't a rule. I just did it. It felt like holding my breath before jumping into water. It made the world go blank for a second. Then it came back sharper. That day was one of those clear fall afternoons where the sun looks pale but warm. The sky was this clean blue that made the gold leaves pop. The air smelled like damp earth and something sweet, maybe decaying apples from somewhere. Mora and I had already been out for hours. We'd gone to the candy store earlier and spent our coins on dumb sugar. She had a little smear of chocolate at the corner of her mouth that she kept forgetting to wipe. We cut through my backyard into the woods because that's what we did. The grass in my yard was short and dead looking from the season. The moment you crossed into the trees, everything changed. Light got chopped into pieces by branches, the temperature dropped, and the smell went from house to soil. We walked through the narrow strip of woods and into the clearing. The wheatgrass waved like it was happy to see us. That sounds ridiculous, but that's what it felt like. The big tree stood there like always, steady, familiar. Mora slapped the trunk with her palm and grinned at me like we were about to do something brave. "Count," she said, breathless like she'd been running even though she hadn't. "Fine," I said, because I had to push back even when I agreed. We took our positions on opposite sides of the trunk. I remember the bark pressed against my shoulder blade. I remember the sun on the back of my neck. I remember thinking, for no reason, that the leaves were louder than usual. A dry rattling sound above us. "Tell me when you're ready," I said, because that was our ritual. "Ready," she called back. I looked down at my sneakers. They were scuffed and dusted with dirt. There was a little crack in the sole that always collected tiny stones. I closed my eyes. "1," I said. "2." And right then, before I hit 3, I heard something that didn't belong. It wasn't a twig snapping. It wasn't a squirrel. It wasn't the wind. It was one huge sound, like a sheet snapping hard in a gust, only deeper, like the single beat of enormous wings. It was so loud it made my chest tighten. It felt close enough that my brain flinched as if something had brushed me. My eyes popped open without me deciding. I looked up because that's what you do when you hear something overhead. I saw blue sky cut by branches, leaves trembling, nothing else. No bird, no plane, no sado. It was just empty. "Mora," I said, turning my head. "What was that?" Silence. That was the first wrong thing. Mora didn't do silence. She'd have laughed, or made a joke, or called me a baby. I took one step around the trunk, expecting to see her pressed against the bark, ready to spring. She wasn't there. At first, my brain tried to keep it in the lane of the game. Like maybe she'd slipped around and was waiting to surprise me. So I circled the trunk faster, my hands out, ready to slap her back. Nothing. I did a full circle. Came back to my starting spot. Still nothing. The clearing stayed exactly the same. Wheatgrass swaying, leaves stirring. The big tree in the center like a fat pillar. But Mora was gone. I felt my stomach drop so hard I got nauseous. There's this exact feeling you get as a kid when you realize you're lost in a store, except this was sharper. This was that feeling with teeth. "Mora," I yelled. My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. "Stop." Seriously. No answer. I spun, scanning the field like if I looked hard enough, I could force her into existence. I expected to see her running toward the tree lean, laughing because she turned it into a bigger game. Except that didn't work. The distance to the trees was too far. Even if she'd sprinted the moment I closed my eyes, she couldn't have made it without me seeing her. Not in 2 seconds. Not silently. I ran toward the edge of the clearing anyway. My feet plowed through the wheatgrass. The stalks slapped my legs. The sound was loud, and it made it worse because I couldn't hear anything else. "Mora," I screamed again. "Mora." Nothing moved. No branch swayed. No body pushed through brush. The woods just stared back. Dark openings between trunks. Dense shadow. I stopped at the tree lean. My breathing came in these hard squeaks. I didn't want to step into the woods. Not because of Blackheart, because my kid brain still clung to the idea that Mora was in the clearing, and if I stepped into the trees, I'd somehow miss her. I turned back to the big tree. It looked wrong now. Not evil, just indifferent. Like it had never been ours. Like we'd been allowed there by mistake. "Mora!" I yelled, and this time it wasn't just yelling. It was begging. It was that raw sound you make when your throat can't decide if it's going to scream or cry. Then I did something I'm still ashamed of. I froze. I didn't sprint back to my house immediately. I didn't run for help the second I realized she was gone. I stood there, spinning in place, my brain flipping through explanations like it was shuffling cards. She fell into a hole. Someone grabbed her. She ran. She hid. She's behind the tree. She's in the grass. Every explanation broke the moment I tried to make it real. There was no hole. The grass wasn't tall enough to swallow a kid without any movement. If someone grabbed her, I would have heard it something, a scuffle, a yelp. And if someone carried her, they would have had to move like they didn't weigh anything. They would have had to cross the clearing without bending the grass, without breaking a branch, without making a sound. And Mora would have fought. She would have screamed. She would have bitten. That was her. She didn't go quietly. I took a few steps toward the big tree again, slow, like maybe the closer I got the more normal things would become. I ran my hand over the bark where she'd been standing. I don't know why. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. It was just bark. I yelled her name until my throat hurt. I screamed for my dad. I screamed for anybody. The sound bounced off the trees and came back thin. And then something shifted. It wasn't like a noise or a movement. It was a feeling that slammed into me, so suddenly my knees went weak. It was like the air got heavier, like somebody put a palm on the top of my head and pushed down. My first thought was ridiculous. A storm's coming. You know how right before thunder the air feels thick? It was like that, but concentrated, focused, not weather. I got this immediate, sick urge not to look up. It came out of nowhere like an instinct. Like when you step off a curb and a car's coming and your body jerks you back without you deciding. Don't look up. I didn't know why. I just knew it. My skin went prickly. My arms goose-bumped. My mouth went dry. I was standing in the clearing and it felt like something had entered the space above me. Not on the ground. Not in the trees. Above. I could feel in my chest. Pressure. Like my lungs didn't want to expand. My heartbeat got loud in my ears. I started to shake, not like a dramatic tremble, but like my muscles were trying to burn off adrenaline. There were eyes on me. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I just knew it, the way you know when someone is staring at you from behind, even before you turn. Except this wasn't curiosity. This wasn't a neighbor. This wasn't a deer. This was hate. I don't have a better word. It wasn't anger like a person gets angry. It was colder, deliberate. Like it had decided a long time ago that me being afraid was a good thing. I wanted to move. I wanted to run. My legs wouldn't do it. I felt pinned in place. Like if I took a step, something would happen. Like if I broke whatever invisible rule was in the air, I'd get punished. And the stupid part is my brain still tried to rationalize it while my body screamed. There's no such thing as a presence. Fear makes you imagine things. You're 9. Your friend's missing. You're panicking. This is your nervous system. Yeah, great. Explain why my throat closed like I was being choked. Explain why I could feel the air vibrating above me like a held breath. Explain why my eyes kept wanting to flick upward, but my whole body recoiled from the idea like it would burn. I think it wanted me to know it was there. I think it wanted me to feel how small I was. I stood there, looking at the ground, and in my peripheral vision, the world started to narrow. Like tunnel vision, the edges of the clearing blurred. The only sharp things were the dirt, the grass stalks, the bark, and my own shoes. Something wet slid down my face. I realized I was crying, but I didn't remember starting. And I couldn't scream. I tried. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. It was like my voice got stolen. Like the air wouldn't carry it. That's the part that still creeps into my dreams. Being in your own mouth and not being able to make sound. Then I heard my dad's voice. Not close at first. Distant. Cutting through the trees from my backyard. "Evan." He used my full name when he was worried. The sound of it jolted something loose in me. I sucked in air like I'd been underwater. I stumbled, one step back, then another. "Dad!" I tried to yell, and it came out broken. But he heard it. I heard him crash through brush. Heavy footsteps, branches snapping, a grown man moving fast. He burst into the clearing like a bear. He looked wild, hair messed, face tied, eyes wide. His breathing sounded rough. For a second, he didn't even look at me. He scanned the clearing like he expected to see a person standing there. Then he saw me. He ran to me and grabbed my shoulders hard enough that later I had little bruises. "What happened?" he barked. Not gentle, not soothing, just urgent. "Are you hurt? Where's Mora?" I tried to speak. The words jammed in my throat. I could only make this choking sound. My hands clawed at his shirt. His eyes flicked over me, checking for blood, torn clothes, anything obvious. Then he looked around again, faster this time, like his brain was finally catching up. "Mora!" he yelled. His voice filled the clearing. It sounded angry, like Mora was hiding as a prank and he was calling her out. "Mora, this isn't funny." I felt it. This is the part that makes me feel insane even typing it. I felt the pressure above us ease when he arrived. Not disappear, but loosen. Like whatever was there had shifted attention. Like it noticed a new variable. My dad tugged me toward the big tree. "Tell me," he said, "right now, what did you see?" My voice squeaked. My throat hurt. She was there. I closed my eyes. I heard something. Then she wasn't. Dad stared at me like he was trying to decide if I was lying. Not because he thought I was a bad kid, because he was a scientist and his brain hated what I was saying. "How long?" he snapped. "How long were your eyes closed?" "2, I swallowed. 2 seconds. 5 seconds. I don't know." My dad's jaw clenched. He looked to the woods, then to the slope, then back to the big tree. He did quick math in his head like that would fix it. He yelled Mora's name again, louder. Then he grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the tree lean like he had decided the only answer was she ran into the woods and got lost. I resisted, not because I didn't want to find her, because the moment my feet hit the shadow under the trees, that pressure above us came back hard enough that I almost vomited. It was like stepping under a low ceiling. I yanked back, shaking. "No," I said without thinking. "No, don't." Dad whipped around. "Don't what?" he demanded. "Evan, what are you doing?" I couldn't say, "Don't go in there, something's above us." The words didn't exist in my mouth. I just shook my head like an idiot and started crying harder. My dad made this frustrated sound, half growl, half sigh, and pulled me close with one arm like he was keeping me from bolting. Then he shouted my name toward the neighborhood because he knew he needed help. He yelled for Mora's dad. He yelled for anyone. Within minutes, it felt like the whole street poured into the woods behind our backyard. Adults crashing through brush with flashlights, even though it was still daylight. Kids on the edge crying because they'd heard Mora's name and understood something bad was happening. Mora's mom arrived, and the moment she hit the clearing, she made a sound I still hear sometimes when I'm trying to sleep. It wasn't a scream like in movies. It was like her lungs emptied all at once. Like her body collapsed into noise. "Where is she?" she shouted, grabbing my dad's arm, then grabbing me. Her nails dug into my shoulders through my shirt. She shook me like shaking a vending machine will make it spit out a candy bar. "Where's my baby? Where is she?" My dad pushed her hands away, firm but not cruel. "He doesn't know," he said. "He said she was there, and then she wasn't. We're looking." "That's not an answer," she snapped, voice cracking into fury. "That's not." She looked at me like I was the only thing she could focus on. "What did you do? Evan, what did you do?" I started crying harder. I tried to say I didn't do anything. I tried to say I swear. The words came out as hiccups. Mora's dad arrived behind her, red-faced, breathing like he'd been sprinting. He didn't yell at me. He didn't ask questions. He just ran to the tree lean and plunged into the woods like he could force the world to give his kid back by sheer will. That's when adults started organizing, the way adults do when they're terrified and trying to control it. Someone ran to call the police. Someone told all the kids to go back to the street. Someone fetched water bottles. People split into lines and started walking through the woods, calling Mora's name in a rhythm. I remember standing near the big tree, my dad's hand gripping my wrist, so tight my fingers went numb. I kept my eyes on the ground because looking up still felt like touching a hot stove. A neighbor, Mr. Halverson, the guy who always smelled like cigarettes, leaned close to another man and muttered something. I caught one word. Blackheart. My dad heard it too. I watched his whole posture stiffen. He turned his head like a predator. Don't, he said flatly. Mr. Halverson raised his hands like he meant no harm. I'm just saying, Walt, people have gone missing back there before. People don't go missing, my dad snapped, and his voice wasn't calm anymore. It had that edge it got when he was arguing with someone dumb. People get lost. People get taken. People leave. Stop feeding that shit right now. Mr. Halverson backed off, but he didn't look convinced. Nobody did. That's the thing. In a small town, the second something weird happens, people reach for folklore because it's already sitting in their hands. The police came fast. We didn't have a big force. A handful of officers. A sheriff everybody knew. They drove their cruisers as close as they could and then came on foot, radios crackling. One officer took Mora's parents aside. Another came to my dad and me. He crouched to my level, his face trying to do kind and failing because his eyes were too sharp. You Evan? He asked. I nodded. Tell me what happened, he said. My dad answered for me at first. They were playing around the tree. He says she vanished. We're searching. The officer's eyes flicked to my dad. I like to hear it from him. My dad's jaw worked. He hated that. He hated authority when it wasn't earned. But he stepped back. I tried to tell the officer what happened. I said we were playing. I said I closed my eyes. I said I heard a loud flapping sound. I said she wasn't there. He asked the same questions in different forms, like he was trying to catch me in a lie. Did I see her leave? Did she say anything? Did anyone else come into the clearing? Did I hear a car? Did I see a man? Every time I said no, his expression got tighter, more suspicious, because no didn't help him. Then he asked, Are you sure she didn't just run into the woods to hide? My dad made a sound like a snort. He'd have seen her. The officer looked at my dad like he was annoyed. Kids miss things. My dad stepped closer. Not that, he said. Not in 5 seconds. Not across that distance. The officer stared at him. Sir, do you want to help us or argue physics right now? My dad's face flushed. Physics is the point, he snapped. If you're going to find her, you have to accept what happened. Something moved her. The officer's eyebrows rose. Moved her how? My dad hesitated. You could see him catch himself. He didn't want to say it out loud because saying it made it real. I don't know, he said, voice stiff. But she didn't walk away. The officer gave me another look. A long one. Like he was filing away what kind of family this was. Like he was deciding we were going to be a problem. Search and rescue turned the woods into a machine. People brought dogs. Someone got maps. Volunteers formed lines. They combed through brush. They checked ditches. They checked the shallow creek deeper in. They checked old culverts where kids sometimes crawled around. They searched as the light drained out of the sky and the woods started looking like teeth. They kept asking me to point out exactly where Morris stood. They made me show them my position. They measured the distance to the trees with their eyes. They looked for disturbed grass, for footprints, for anything. There was nothing. No scuff marks in the dirt. No snap stalks leading away. No broken branches. No discarded. Nothing that said a human body moved from point A to point B. I watched men in uniforms crouch and stare at the ground like they could interrogate it. The dogs were the worst part. They brought in 2 different ones. German Shepherd mixes, strong and focused. They asked Mora's mom for something with her scent. She gave them a jacket from her car, like she'd kept it there for emergencies. The dogs sniffed the jacket. Their bodies tensed. They started pulling at the leads, noses low, moving with purpose. They led their handlers right into the clearing. They circled the big tree. They stopped. They whined. One of them sat down, then laid down flat like it didn't want to be standing. The handler tugged the lead, annoyed. The dog refused. It pressed its belly into the ground and let out this low sound like it was hurt. The handler tried again, coaxing. The dog's ears flattened. It wouldn't move. That should have been dramatic in a satisfying way. Like, aha, proof something strange happened. But watching it in real life just made my stomach twist. Because animals don't care about your story. They just react. And that dog reacted like the clearing wasn't safe. The handler muttered something under his breath, embarrassed like the dog was making him look bad. He dragged the dog back a few steps. The dog dug its paws in. My dad saw that, and his face went pale. He didn't say paranormal. He didn't say ghost. He didn't say Blackheart. He just looked up at the sky, and the way his throat bobbed made me think, for a split second, that he felt it too. Then my body did the thing it had been holding back. I shook. My vision went fuzzy. Sun got far away. My dad tightened his grip on me, and I heard him say my name like he was talking through water. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in our living room with a blanket over me, my mouth tasting like metal, my head pounding. The house smelled like coffee and sweat. The lights were on even though it was late. I sat up and my stomach rolled. For a second, I didn't remember why I was on the couch. Then it hit me and I bolted upright so fast I got dizzy. "Mora," I croaked. My dad was in the doorway. His face looked older than it should have. His eyes were red like he'd rubbed them too much. He didn't say it. He didn't have to. I tried to get up, like I was going to go back out there and find her myself. Dad put his hands on my shoulders and pushed me gently back down. Not like a punishment, like he needed me to stay put so he could keep at least one thing from falling apart. "They're still searching," he said. His voice sounded flat, like he'd filed all the emotion away because if he let out, he'd break. "It's dark. They'll keep going." "Where is she?" I whispered. My throat hurt like I'd been screaming for hours, which I had. "Where did she go?" Dad stared at me. For a moment, he looked like he might say something honest and terrifying. Then he swallowed it. "I don't know," he said. The rest of that night is fragments. People coming in and out. Voices murmuring. The phone ringing. My dad snapping short answers. Someone gave me a glass of water. Someone told me to try to sleep. Like sleep was a switch. I remember Mora's mom came to our house at some point. Her face looked ruined, like her skin didn't fit. She didn't scream at me anymore. That rage had burned out and left something worse. She sat on the floor in front of our couch and stared at me with these empty eyes. Then she said, very quietly, "Tell me what you're not telling me." I stare back, too scared to even breathe. "I told you," I whispered. I closed my eyes, and she wasn't there. Mora's mom's mouth trembled. "That's not a thing," she said. She wasn't angry. She sounded like she was pleading with the universe. "That's not how this works." My dad stepped in, voice sharp. "Don't do that," he said. "Don't put this on him." Mora's mom looked up at my dad like she'd just remembered he existed. "Then where is she?" she hissed. "If her kid didn't do it, then where is my daughter?" "You're the science man, Walt. Explain it." My dad's face went tight. "I can't," he said. "Not yet." She laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was this brittle, broken sound. "Not yet," she repeated. "Not yet. Like there's going to be a later." Then she stood up and walked out without another word. The front door clicked shut and the sound felt like a sentence ending. The next morning, search teams returned at first light. The woods behind our house filled with strangers. Dogs, flashlights, radios, men in work boots stepping over our backyard like it was their property. News vans showed up by afternoon. Not national, local, but still. Cameras, microphones, missing child turned into a story you could package. My dad tried to keep me inside. I resisted. I didn't want to be inside because inside felt like admitting she was gone. I sat on our back steps and watched lines of people move through the trees. I listened to Mora's name getting shouted over and over until it stopped sounding like a name and started sounding like a noise. Mora's parents put up flyers. Her face stared out from every lamppost. Big brown eyes, freckles, a smile that didn't match what was happening. "Have you seen this child?" in bold letters like bold letters could drag her back. The police asked me questions again. Same ones. Different officers. Different tones. Some tried to sound gentle. Some sounded like they'd already decided I was lying. They brought me to the station once. I sat in a small room that smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap cleaner. They offered me a soda. I didn't drink it. My hand shook too much. A detective with tired eyes sat across from me and spoke like he was addressing an adult. Evan, kids sometimes do things and then get scared, he said. If something happened, an accident, this is the time to say it. My stomach flipped. I didn't, I said. My voice got high. I didn't do anything. He watched me like he was measuring the truth in my face. Did Maura fall? He asked. Did she hit her head? Did you push her? No. I shouted, and then I started crying, which felt humiliating. She was there, and then she wasn't. The detective's jaw clenched. People don't just disappear, he said, and it wasn't cruel. It was exhausted. Help me help her. Tell me what you saw. I told you, I whispered. I wiped my face with my sleeve. My nose ran. I hated myself for being messy. Like being messy made me less believable. I closed my eyes. I heard that sound. Then she was gone. He leaned back and rubbed his face. That sound, he repeated. Describe it again. I tried. I said wings. I said a sheet snapping. I said it felt close. He wrote it down anyway. Pen scratching paper like it mattered. At school, when we went back, kids looked at me like I was contagious. Teachers spoke to me gently, like my ears would break. Parents whispered. Some kids asked me if I did it. Not as a joke, as a real question. The kind that makes you feel like you're outside your own body. Adults started telling their own versions of the story almost immediately. That's another thing about small towns. Tragedy gets turned into gossip before the body's even cold. Except in this case, there was no body, so the story stayed hot. Some people said Maura got taken by a man in a van. They pointed at every unfamiliar vehicle, like it was guilty. Some said her dad's cousin was shady, and police should look there, because people always want someone local to blame. And some, quietly, in that half-superstitious way, said Blackheart finally took a child. My dad heard that and exploded. I saw him argue with grown men in our driveway. His face red, his hands cutting the air. She didn't get taken by a damn ghost, he snapped. Stop saying that name around my kid. It's just what people say, Mr. Halverson muttered, defensive. It ain't like we want it to be true. What you want doesn't matter, my dad shot back. You're poisoning the well. You're making it easier to accept that you can't do anything. That's what those stories are for. So you can shrug and say, well, Blackheart, and go back to your dinner. Someone else, Mrs. Keene, who went to church twice a week and always offered me cookies, said softly, then what do you think happened, Walt? My dad's mouth opened, closed. He looked at me. His eyes flicked like he was checking if I was listening. Then he said, through clenched teeth, I think someone took her, and I think the police are fucking it up. He stormed inside and slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. That was my dad in those days. All rage, no comfort. He didn't know how to sit in helplessness without turning it into a fight. For weeks, our house became part command center, part pressure cooker. Police stopped by. Volunteers stopped by. Reporters called. Maura's parents called, sometimes screaming, sometimes begging. My dad pinned a map of the woods and the surrounding area to our kitchen wall. He marked grids with a pen. He wrote notes in the margins. He tried to treat it like a problem that could be solved if you broke it down enough. He talked about wind direction and river currents and how scent disperses. He talked about how long it would take a person to carry a child through certain terrain. He talked about search patterns. He talked himself into knots. At night, I lay in bed and stared at my ceiling while my window faced that tree line. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like that single snapping beat I'd heard in the clearing. I had nightmares so vivid I woke up tasting dirt. In one, I opened my eyes mid-count and Maura was still there, but her face was wrong, like someone had taken the features and moved them around slightly, enough that you could tell it was her and also not her. In another, I looked up, did the thing my body had screamed not to do, and saw something that wasn't a shape so much as a hole in the sky, a darker patch where the blue should be, and it stared back. I'd wake up choking on my own breath, and my dad would be there, because he wasn't sleeping much either. He'd sit on the edge of my bed, his hand on my shoulder, and say, "It's just a dream." But his voice wasn't convincing. It sounded like he was saying it because he had to, not because he believed it. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear him in the kitchen, papers rustling, the refrigerator opening, the phone dialing. Once I heard him talking to someone in a low voice, too quiet to make out the words. I crept out of bed and stood in the hall and listened like a little spy. "Doesn't make sense," he said. "Distance, time, no tracks. Dog, stop." A pause. Then, softer. "I don't know what I'm missing." The way he said missing made my stomach twist. It sounded like he wasn't just talking about data. The search went from frantic to systematic to desperate. They dragged the creek. They checked old wells. They checked sheds. They checked the abandoned house at the end of the street. They dug up rumors and chased them until they turned to dust. Nothing. No hair. No clothing. No stew. No blood. No sign that Maura had ever existed beyond photos and flyers and the empty space at her desk in school. Weeks turned into months. The leaves died and fell. The woods got barer, easier to see through, and still they found nothing. Snow came, thin at first, then heavier. People searched again because snow showed tracks. There were tracks. Deer. Rabbits. Searchers. No child's footprint leading away from the clearing. No darag marks. Nothing that made any sense. Maura's parents stopped looking like people. They looked like paper. Her mom lost weight so fast her cheeks hollowed. Her dad started drinking. And when he wasn't drinking, he was out walking the woods alone like a ghost of his own. Once in December, Maura's dad showed up at our house. It was late afternoon, the sky already bruising toward dark. He pounded on our door so hard the glass rattled. My dad opened it and immediately stiffened. "Frank," he said cautiously. Maura's dad pushed past him without asking. He walked into our living room and stood there, swaying slightly, his eyes bloodshot. "I know you know something," he said, not shouting. Worse, calm, like he'd made peace with the thought. My dad's face flushed. "Get out," he said immediately. "You're not doing this." Frank jabbed a finger toward me because I was sitting on the couch, frozen, watching this unfold. "He was with her," Frank said. "He was right there. And then she's gone. And nobody finds a goddamn thing. That ain't..." His voice broke into something angry. "That ain't normal." "No shit," my dad snapped. "You think I don't know it's not normal?" Frank turned on him. "Then why won't you say it?" he demanded. "Why won't you say what it is?" My dad stared back. "Because saying it doesn't help," he said. "Because I don't know." Frank took a step toward me. My body locked. I couldn't move. His face loomed, stubble and alcohol breath and grief sweat. "Tell me," he said, and his voice went low, dangerous. "Did you do something? Did you get mad at her? Did you push her? Did you let her go with someone?" "I didn't," I whispered. Tears burned behind my eyes. "I swear I didn't." Frank's eyes flicked, searching my face for something he could grab. "Then where is she?" I opened my mouth, and I almost said it. I almost told him about the pressure above me, about the urge not to look up, about the feeling of hate like a weight. But I didn't, because I knew, even at 9, that if I said it, it would infect everything. It would become the story. It would become the explanation people reached for. And it wouldn't bring Maura back. It would just make me the weird kid who said his friend got taken by something in the sky. So I just shook my head. Frank's face twisted. He made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Then he turned and punched my dad in the chest hard enough my dad stumbled back into the wall. "You're hiding," Frank snarled. "You're hiding behind your science because you can't admit there's shit out there you don't understand." My dad lunged forward, grabbed Frank's coat, and shoved him toward the door. "Get the fuck out of my house," he barked. His voice shook with rage. "You don't get to put this on my kid. You don't get to." Frank stumbled out onto the porch. He spun back, eyes wild. "If she's dead," he said, voice cracking, "I hope you live a long time with that." Then he walked off down the steps and into the cold, and I watched him go like I was watching a car crash you can't stop. After that, Our street felt poisoned, like the air carried accusation. Kids stopped coming by. Parents avoided my dad at the grocery store. Teachers didn't know how to talk to me. I became the boy who was there, the last person to see Maura alive. The guilt didn't feel like a thought. It felt like a physical thing pressing into my ribs. I'd be eating cereal and suddenly get the urge to puke because I'd picture Maura's face. I'd be sitting in class and hear the scratch of a pencil, and my brain would translate it into that snapping wing sound. My dad tried to keep things normal. He failed. He started drinking more too, though he'd never call it that. Just a whiskey at night to take the edge off, except the edge never went away. Sometimes he'd look at me like he wanted to ask questions he didn't know how to phrase. Did you really only close your eyes for a few seconds? Are you sure? Are you sure you didn't see something? He never asked those out loud. Instead, he got angry at the police, angry at the town, angry at God, even though he didn't believe in God, angry at the woods. And the woods just sat there behind our backyard, quiet, unchanged, like it had swallowed a secret and was digesting it slowly. One morning in January, after a snow, my dad woke me up before school. His eyes looked raw like he hadn't slept. "Get dressed," he said. I blinked, confused. "Why?" He didn't answer. He just stood there until I moved, so I did, pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt with stiff fingers. We walked out into the backyard. The snow crunched under our boots. The air bit my lungs. The treeline looked closer in winter, darker because the leaves were gone and the trunk stood out like bars. My stomach tightened. "Dad, just come," he said. He led me to the edge of the woods. He didn't go in. He just stood at the boundary and stared into the trees like he was staring at an enemy. Then he said, very quietly, "Tell me again." My throat went dry. "Tell you what? What happened?" he said. His voice strained. "Exactly. No guessing. No stories. Just what your eyes did. What your ears did. What your body did." I stared at the snow because looking at the woods made my skin prickle. So I told him again. The big tree. Counting. Eyes closed. The sound. Opening my eyes. Maura gone. My dad's hands clenched into fists. "The sound," he said. "It came from where?" I hesitated. I knew what answer he wanted. Something physical. Something he could chase. "It felt above," I said. And as soon as I said it, my stomach twisted because it was the first time I'd admitted that part out loud. My dad's head snapped toward me. "Above," he repeated. I swallowed. My heart pounded. The cold air burned my throat. Like something flapped, I said. Like it was over us. My dad stared at me hard. And after she was gone, he said slowly, "You screamed. You called for me." I nodded. He licked his lips. "And then you stopped." I nodded again because he was right. I had stopped. Not by choice. "Why?" he asked. And his voice cracked on the word like he didn't mean for it to. I felt tears prick my eyes, hot against the cold. Because I started and my throat tightened. Because there was something there. Because I felt watched. Because I felt hate pressing down on me. Because my body told me not to look up like looking up would kill me. I couldn't say all that. Not then. Not with the woods right there, the boundary line like a mouth. I got scared. I whispered. My dad's face twisted like he was in pain. He turned back to the woods and stared up, not at the treeline, but above it, at the pale winter sky. "I don't understand it," he said, voice rough. "I don't." The wind moved through the bare branches and made a dry, clicking sound. The woods didn't answer. My dad exhaled and rubbed his face hard. Then he put a hand on my shoulder, and his grip was too tight. "We're leaving," he said. "What?" My brain didn't process. "Leaving where?" "Chicago," he said. "I got offered a job. We're taking it." It felt like he'd punched me in the stomach. Not because I loved our town, because leaving felt like admitting defeat. Like we were abandoning Maura. Like we were running from something. "You can't," I said. My voice went thin. What if they find her?" My dad's mouth tightened. "They're not finding her," he said, too blunt, and then his face flinched like he regretted the words the second they left his mouth. I stared at him, shocked. "You don't know that." My dad's eyes were wet. I had almost never seen my dad cry. He didn't let it happen. Seeing it made me feel like the world was cracking. I know what I know, he said. And I know this town is eating you alive. It's eating me alive. We can't, he swallowed hard. We can't stay here and rot. What about Mora? I whispered. My dad looked away. I'm sorry, he said, and it was the most helpless I'd ever heard him sound. We moved in early spring. The day we left, the sky was gray and low, and the river looked swollen and brown like it was carrying the whole winter away. Our neighbors watched from their porches. Some waved half-heartedly. Some didn't. Mora's house sat 3 doors down, quiet, the windows dark. Her mom had taped so many missing posters on the front door that you couldn't see the paint anymore. The edges of the paper had curled from rain and sun. The ink had faded. As we loaded the car, I kept expecting, this is the stupid part, I kept expecting Mora to come sprinting down the street, yelling my name like she'd just been gone for a while, like the whole thing was a prank stretched too far. Of course she didn't. My dad drove. I sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window as our neighborhood slid away. The woods behind our backyard flashed between houses one last time, that dark strip of trees like a held breath. I didn't look up. I didn't even want to, but I felt it anyway, this sick, crawling sensation along my scalp, like I was tracking the car as it pulled away, like something patient and heavy watching us go, not angry, not rushed. Just there. Chicago should have drowned it out. Sirens, trains, people everywhere. The city always moving like it's trying to outrun itself. That was my dad's logic. Noise over memory. He was wrong. The first week in our apartment, I woke up at 3 a.m. because the radiator clanged, and my body reacted like it was that snap in the clearing. Heart sprinting, mouth dry, hands shaking. I lay there staring at a ceiling I didn't know, listening to my dad in the next room pacing like an animal. We didn't talk about Mora. Not really. We talked around her. The move. The situation. Back home. Like naming her would make her step into the room. School was easier because nobody knew me. No guispes. No parents giving me that look. But the guilt didn't care about fresh faces. It showed up in stupid places. I'd be in the cafeteria and see someone with freckles and my stomach would drop. I'd hear kids laughing behind me and my brain would flash that empty space behind a big tree. I started counting without meaning to. Not just games. Everything. Steps to the bus. Seconds between streetlights. 5 became poison. If I caught myself about to count to 5, I'd stop at 4 or push to 6. I told myself it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. My dad buried himself in work. Labs, conferences, new colleagues. He smiled more in public than he did at home. At home, he got quiet, and when he wasn't quiet, he got sharp. If I brought up Mora, he'd freeze like I'd touched a bruise. Once, maybe a year after we moved, I asked him if the police ever found anything. I said it casually, like I was asking about a sports score. He didn't look up from the sink. No, he said. Do you think she's alive? I forced it out. He shut the water off. Slowly. I don't know, he said. Then he added, like it was a correction, statistically, and stopped. His shoulders rose and fell. I don't do statistics on kids. That was the closest we got. Time did what time always does. It didn't heal it. It layered over it. New schools, new friends, puberty, jobs, girls, college, the normal mess of growing up. If you looked at my life on paper, it was fine. Better than fine. I became the kind of person who seemed stable. Inside, I carried a clearing. I avoided forests without even realizing I was doing it. Camping trips? I had an excuse. Hikes? Bad knee. When friends dragged me somewhere with trees and quiet, I stayed near the trailhead like I had to guard the edge. I hated open fields with one lonely tree. I hated counting games. I hated the way fall air smelled because it always smelled like that day. My dad never went back to our town. Not once. He wouldn't admit it, but the place scared him. Not the folklore. Not Blackheart. The fact that something happened in that clearing that he couldn't name, and his whole identity was naming things. He died when I was 27. Heart attack. Sudden. One phone call that turned my bones to ice. I flew home, did the funeral, did the polite hugs, did the paperwork. I kept waiting for grief to knock me down. It came later in waves and quiet rooms. When I cleaned out his apartment, I found the box. It was shoved in the back of a closet behind old winter coats. A plain cardboard box sealed with duct tape. My name was written on it in my dad's handwriting. Just my name. No explanation. I sat on the floor and stared at it for a long time. My hands went sweaty. I already knew. Inside were folders, notes, photocopies, a map of our old woods with grid marks, faded but careful, handwritten dates, names of officers, times, the kind of obsessive record you keep when you can't accept nothing. And at the bottom, wrapped in plastic like it was fragile evidence, was the newspaper clipping. Missing Girl 9 still unfound. My town's name. A photo of Mora that made my throat close. The article was short, blunt. Last seen. No leads. Search ongoing. The kind of small-town reporting that tries to sound steady while everybody panics. Tucked behind it was a copy of a police report. Reading it felt like swallowing glass. Clinical language. Distances. Times. Witness statement. Evan M. stated he closed eyes while counting and subject disappeared. Like that sentence belonged in a world where it could make sense. There was one part one didn't expect. A note from an officer, handwritten in the margin of a typed page. Dog refused to track past tree. Handler noted animal spooked. Unusual. My dad had underlined it hard enough to score the paper. I sat there with those papers spread around me and felt something I hadn't felt since I was 9. That pressure in the chest, that sense of something hovering just out of sight. Like the story had been asleep and I'd kicked it awake. I tried to live with it. I tried to put the box back and pretend I hadn't opened it. I couldn't. It ate my focus. It showed up in my dreams again, sharp and vivid. So I did the thing I swore I'd never do. I went back. It had been almost 20 years since I'd seen my hometown. The highway exits looked smaller. The gas stations looked poorer. The river still ran thick and brown, dragging itself past like it had places to be. I parked near my old street and sat in the car gripping the steering wheel until my hands cramped. I expected the neighborhood to feel haunted. It felt normal, which was worse. Kids rode bikes. A dog barked. Someone mowed their lawn like the past wasn't crouched behind the tree line. Our old house had a different color now. Different curtains. Different car in the driveway. I didn't get out. I didn't want to meet whoever lived there. I didn't want to explain why I was staring. I walked instead, down the sidewalk, past the 3-house gap that used to separate me from Mora. Her house still stood. Same shape, different paint. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard. I felt sick, like I was trespassing on grief. I kept going until the street ended at the familiar edge of woods. The trees were thinner than I remembered, or maybe I was bigger and less impressed. Either way, the tree leans still had that wall quality. That don't quality. I stood at the boundary for a long time. Cars passed behind me. Someone's music thumped faintly. Normal life. Then I stepped in. The air changed immediately. Cooler. Damp. Smelled like rot and mushrooms. My shoes sank into soft dirt. The sounds of the street dulled fast. In less than 20 steps, it felt like the world had shut a door. My pulse started climbing. I told myself to breathe. I told myself I was an adult. I told myself it was just trees. I followed the path my feet remembered, even though my brain claimed it didn't. The hidden clearing opened up ahead like a memory popping into focus. The field was smaller than in my mind, but the big tree was still there. I stopped at the edge of the wheatgrass, shorter now, more patchy, and stared at that trunk. My stomach twisted hard. The bark looked the same. The scar patterns. The rough grooves. Like the tree hadn't moved on. I walked toward it. Each step felt like stepping onto thin ice. When I reached the trunk, I put my palm against it. Cold bark. Solid. Nothing magical. Nothing cinematic. I kept my hand there anyway, like touch could translate time. "I'm sorry," I said out loud, and my voice sounded stupid in the open air. Then the woods went quiet in a way that wasn't natural. I don't mean no birds. I mean the whole space felt like it leaned in, like sound got sucked away. My own breathing sounded too loud. My ears rang, and my body did it before my mind could argue. Don't look up. That instinct hit so hard my knees flexed. My throat tightened. My scalp prickled. The same pressure, dense, deliberate, settled over me like a hand on the top of my skull. It was back. I froze with my palm against the tree, my eyes fixed on the dirt at the base of the trunk because my body refused to let them rise. My heart hammered. My mouth went dry. It felt exactly like being 9 again, except now I knew the shape of the fear, and that made it worse. There were eyes on me, not from the woods, not from behind the tree, from above. And with it came that same thing I've never been able to describe without sounding insane. Hate. Focused, amused hate. Like my panic was food. I tried to pull my hand away from a bark. My fingers didn't want to unstick. My muscles trembled. A low sound escaped my throat, half breath, half whimper, and I hated myself for it. Hated that I still reacted like prey. Then, right beside my hand, I heard it. A soft sound. Not a voice. Not the wind. A whisper of movement against bark, like fingertips dragging gently. I snapped my eyes to the trunk, still refusing to go up, and saw something that made my stomach drop straight through me. Pressed into the rough bark, right at kid height, were small indentations. Not old carvings. Not initials. Not damage from animals. They looked like fingerprints, like a child had been held against the tree hard enough to leave marks, and the tree had swallowed the impression and kept it. I stared until my vision blurred. My brain tried to call it pareidolia. Random bark patterns. Coincidence. But the marks weren't random. They were spaced like hands. 2 hands. Fingers splayed. My lungs seized. The pressure above me deepened like it noticed my reaction. The air felt thick. My knees shook. My skin buzzed with adrenaline. I couldn't move, couldn't look up, couldn't think past one brutal fact. Something was still here. I don't know why, but I did the dumbest possible thing. Maybe because some part of me wanted an answer more than it wanted safety. Maybe because guilt makes you reckless. I started to count, not out loud at first, in my head, because my mouth wouldn't work. 1, 2, my throat closed. I swallowed. 3, the wheatgrass around me rustled, though there was no wind. 4, my vision tunneled. My palm tingled against the bark like it was numb. 5, that snapping sound hit the air again. One huge beat, close enough that my ribs vibrated, and something yanked the pressure sideways like a curtain shifting. I stumbled, losing balance, and my hand slid down the trunk. For the first time in decades, I looked up. The sky over the clearing was blue and empty. No beauty, no shape, no sado, just branches swaying gently like nothing had happened. But the hate was still there. Not visible, not audible, present. And then, right as I stood there shaking, something dropped at my feet. A small object, landing softly in the grass like it didn't weigh much. I stared down. It was a hair tie, a faded elastic loop with a little plastic bead. Dirty, sun-bleached, the kind of cheap thing kids lose 100 times. My stomach turned because I recognized it. I shouldn't have, but I did. I'd seen it in Mora's hair 1,000,000 times. She used to snap it against her wrist when she got bored. My hands went cold. I didn't pick it up at first. I just stared like it was going to bite me. Then I heard a sound that wasn't a snap. A faint, thin noise like breath through a crack. It came from the tree. I backed up so fast I tripped in the grass. My heel caught, and I went down hard on my ass, pain shooting up my spine. I scrambled backward, palms scraping dirt, eyes locked on the trunk. The sound came again. Not words, not a clear cry, just a tiny exhale like someone on the other side of a wall. My chest seized so hard I thought I was going to pass out. Mora, I whispered, but my voice came out shredded. The pressure above me tightened instantly, furious now, not amused. The air felt like it shoved down. My ears popped. I gagged. The instinct screamed louder than ever. Don't look up. Don't stay, don't. I didn't argue. I grabbed the hair tie without thinking, shoved it in my pocket, and ran. I ran like I was 9 again, crashing through wheatgrass, slamming into branches. not caring about scratches, not caring about noise. My lungs burned. My vision blurred with tears I didn't remember starting. Behind me, I heard that single snapping beat again, and it felt like laughter. I didn't stop until I was out of the woods and back on the street where normal sounds lived. Cars, a lawnmower, a kid shouting, the banal noise of people who still believe the world stayed put. I leaned over with my hands on my knees and dry heaved until my stomach cramped. A neighbor watering their yard stared at me like I was on drugs. I didn't care. I couldn't explain it if I tried. I drove straight to the police station. It looked the same in spirit, even if the paint was newer. Same cheap chairs, same tired fluorescent lights. A different officer at the desk, younger than I was now, which felt wrong. I told him my name. I told him why I was there. I told him I'd found something related to the Mora case. His face shifted the moment he heard her name. Even after all those years, it still lived in the building like a stain. He brought out an older detective. Gray hair, heavy eyes, the kind of man who'd seen too many bad endings. He recognized my last name. Of course he did. In small towns, names stick. "What is it?" he asked, already guarded. I pulled the hair tie from my pocket and set on the table between us like a chess move. "This," I said. My voice shook despite me, trying to keep it steady. "I found it in the clearing, by the tree. Today." He stared at it, didn't touch it. "Could be anybody's," he said. "It's hers." I snapped, and the sharpness surprised me. "I recognize it." He leaned back slightly. "After 20 years, he said, skeptical but not mocking. "You're sure?" I felt my temper rise. All that old helplessness came boiling up. "I'm telling you what happened," I said. Again, like I told you people back then. "I went back there and..." "And what?" he said, voice flat. I stopped, because here it was, the cliff edge. If I said the truth, the pressure, the instinct, the don't look up, the sound, the breath from the tree, I'd become the story. The crazy grown man who came back and spooked himself. The detective watched me, waiting, so I gave him the part he could file. "I found this," I said, "and I think you should test it. DNA. Whatever you can do now that you couldn't then." His eyes flicked once, a tiny sign that he understood more than he wanted to admit. He picked up the hair tie with 2 fingers like it might be contaminated in more ways than one. He put it in a small evidence bag. "We can send it," he said. "No promises." I leaned forward. "You ever go back there?" I asked quietly. "You ever stand in that clearing and feel like you're being watched?" His eyes hardened. "No," he said immediately. He was lying. I knew it the same way I'd known when eyes were on me. His jaw tightened. His throat worked. He didn't meet my gaze for a second. "People in town still talk," I said. "They still say that name." "Don't," he said, sharp like my dad used to. "Don't bring folklore into this." "It's not folklore," I said before I could stop myself. The detective stared at me for a long moment. Then he said low, controlled, "Go back to Chicago." I blinked. "What? Go back to your life?" he said. "Let us do what we can. That's all I'm saying." It wasn't advice. It was a warning. I left the station shaking. I didn't go back to the clearing. I couldn't. I spent one more night in a motel on the edge of town, staring at the ceiling, listening for that snap in the air like it could follow me through walls. In the morning, I drove back to the city with the hair tie gone from my pocket and a worse weight in my chest than I'd arrived with. 2 weeks later, the detective called. His voice was tight. "We got a hit," he said. My whole body went cold. "A hit," I repeated, barely able to breathe. "Partial," he said quickly, like he didn't want me to run with it. "It's degraded. But yes, it matches the family. We're going to notify them. We're going to..." He paused. I heard papers shifting. "We're going to reopen the file." "Where is she?" I whispered. Silence. Then he said something that turned my blood to ice. "We don't know," he said. "But I'm telling you right now, do not go back out there." My mouth went numb. "What?" Another pause. Then, quieter, like he hated himself for saying it. "Because we sent a team to that clearing yesterday, and the dogs wouldn't go near the tree." I sat on my kitchen floor with the phone pressed to my ear, shaking like a kid. "Did you hear it?" I asked, barely audible. "That sound." He exhaled. Long, go live your life, he said again, and his voice cracked just enough to tell me he wasn't talking to me like a citizen. He was talking to me like someone who'd looked at the same empty sky and felt something looking back. Then he hung up. That's where it stands. That's the truth I've been carrying. There's no clean ending. There's no villain in handcuffs. There's no body found under a log. All I have is a tree in a clearing that still feels like a trap, a sound like one huge wing beat, and the fact that something connected to Morrow is still there after all those years, waiting like it never got tired. If my dad were alive, he'd call an anomaly, a gap in data, a problem to solve. But I heard his voice in my head when that detective warned me, and I realized my dad's real fear wasn't ghosts. It was the idea that the world has corners you can't light up no matter how smart you are, and that sometimes a kid can vanish in 5 seconds and the truth can sit right above you, invisible and hateful, and you'll never be able to force it to show its face. If you read this far, thanks. I don't know what you'll take from it. I don't even know what I take from it anymore. I just know I'm done pretending it didn't happen.